We're looking at the message this weekend, and we're trying to figure out, okay, so we're in this spot where we're kind of getting closer to Christmas, and trying to find sermon series and a way to make things fit. It's like you look at the year of sermon planning, it's really like a puzzle, and every once in a while, there's just like a gap, and you got to find something to fill the gap. And this weekend is one of those weekends, and if you're a preacher, you do this thing, okay, where just as you live your life, you look for illustrations and examples everywhere. It's just something that we do. So like when I get up to speak, I usually get up with about 2,500 to 3,000 words and do that a few times, 47 times a year. Like you just kind of have to be always looking for stuff. And so I don't know if you guys watched Some Good News with John Krasinski back during the COVID shutdown season. But we did because there was nothing to do and you just had to watch anything you could see. And so I remember watching one of those episodes on YouTube, and the cast from Hamilton came on and did this song. Do you guys remember that? No? Well, they did. And they got on and they sang the title song from Hamilton, and I was like, this is really good. And so I like to run, and so what I did is I downloaded the whole Hamilton musical because it's all just songs. Don't laugh at me. And so I downloaded all of them, and I would listen to it while I ran. I listened to it probably more times than now I feel comfortable admitting. And I was running, one day, and I remember where I was, and I was running. I came to this song, and it's the song "You'll Be Back" for both of you who are familiar with the album. And as I was running, I ran. I was listening to this song, and I just kind of stopped, and I was like, "Whoa, this is talking about sin." And so it kind of caught me because I'm always looking for illustrations, and I listened to the song again, and I was like, man, the way that he is talking, if sin could talk, this is exactly what sin would say. And so I want to read to you the lyrics. Okay, so I'm just going to read you the lyrics, and it hit me, it stopped me, and I think hopefully you'll be able to see where I'm going. And so this is King George singing to the American colonies, and it's meant to be in jest. It's going to seem kind of heavy at the end, but it finishes with going da 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 da. So it finishes light, but it does feel kind of heavy when you read it on the paper. King George singing to the American colonies. He says this. He says, "You'll be back. Soon you'll see. You'll remember that you belong to me. You'll be back. Time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well." I mean, is that not something like sin? Isn't that what sin does? It wants you to misremember how it served you. It wants you to remember the things that you might have enjoyed while ignoring the pain. Keeps going. Oceans rise, empires fall. We've seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Another one. You'll be back like before. I will fight the fight and win the war. For your love, for your praise, and I'll love you till my dying days. When you're gone, I'll go mad, so don't throw away the thing that we had. Because when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Da 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 da. See, it sounds really heavy, but really, if you could hear the song, it's really not. Now, this is what sin does. It makes these promises that it has no intention of keeping. It reminds you of the good or the parts of it that you enjoy, and it causes you to forget about the death and destruction that it brings. And even if you think of it just from the perspective of American history, because that's what the musical is based on American history. And this is exactly what Britain did. They offered bondage when the people wanted freedom. And is that not exactly what sin does? It promises you freedom, but it continues to give you more and more bondage. And maybe even it starts out like something that seems okay, But when push comes to shove, you open your eyes and you think, this is not at all what I signed up for. This is not at all what I wanted. And maybe just so that we know that we're talking about the same terms. When I talk about sin, I am talking about anything, any desire, any thought, any action, anything that could be defined as something that God wouldn't want you to do. That anything that the Bible says, hey, this is what you should do, and you do something else. Anything that would be outside of God's will for your life could be defined as sin. And when you indulge those things, you find that you end up in a place that you never want to go. The beauty of the gospel is that Jesus offers a different way. He offers a better way. And we see some of this tension here as we look at John's gospel in chapter 10, and we'll start in verse 10. You can go there with me if you'd like. John 10:10 says this, Jesus speaking, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand is not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep and sees the wolf coming, he leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them up and scatters them. He flees because he's a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I, Jesus, am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. And just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep." It's kind of using the song as a springboard, but really using this text for our content. I just want to give you a couple thoughts about sin. I want to give you a couple thoughts about sin, and then I want to talk about the option that Jesus gives in face of our sin. And the first thought about sin is this, is that sin is deceptive. That sin is deceptive. It deceives you. It lies to you. It does things, it causes you to do things dishonestly. I mean, look at John 10:10. How is it described? The thief. It's a thief. It's something that steals from you. Like when you think about someone who would define themselves as a thief, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to study you. They're going to learn about you. They're going to find the moment when you let your guard down. And the second that you do, they're going to take what's yours. That's a good thief. A bad thief, what they're going to do is they're going to find you when you are in a place where you feel vulnerable. And they're going to use that vulnerability to overpower you and to steal from you the things that they want that are yours. Like this is what a thief does. If you've ever had anything stolen from you in your life, you don't look back on that circumstance and think, that guy who stole my TV, he was a good fella. He really meaned well. I mean, he could have broken more windows. He only broke one. Like you don't look back on it like that, right? You look back, you feel stupid. You feel taken advantage of. You're like, man, how did I let that happen? We had a circumstance happen, I think it was like 7 years ago at the church, and it was so weird. We're off the highway, so this doesn't happen a lot, but it happens occasionally because some people know that we're here. And it was like a Wednesday morning, and some guy came in off the road, and he was driving, and he's like, "Hey, can I use your restroom?" So we're like, "Yeah, go for it." And so he goes, and he's really kind, and he's pleasantries or whatever, and he's like, "Hey, is it okay if I go back and use your restroom? Like, there's a gas station right off the road. We didn't really think about that." So we're like, "Yeah, of course, you can use our bathroom." It took him about 15 minutes, which, looking back on, it's kind of alarming, but, we're just kind of living our lives. And he leaves, and he's super kind on the way out the door, lots of pleasantries, even, does this thing that people do where, you know what, I might even check this church out, that kind of thing. About 2 hours later, one of us has to use the bathroom. And we go in there, and we realize that the dude stole all of the internal pieces of our toilet. Took the lid off and just started taking stuff out and walked out with the stuff. So we were like, well, we've got to replace that because it was Wednesday and there were people that were going to be in the building that night. It's about $25 to replace it, which really begs the question, like, where's the market for used internal toilet parts? Like, there's probably something better here he could have stolen, but that was what he went for. Like, I don't know. But it was one of those moments, like, we're like, that was so weird. I mean, you're not going to follow him in there and make sure he doesn't do that. That'd be a very specific thing to, like, it's weird. But, like, we look back on it, and you're like, man, we don't look back on it and think, man, maybe we do, like, poor guy, but you feel stupid. Feel taken advantage of. Feel frustrated. Like someone had to spend that afternoon fixing the toilet. Like, you just don't look at it and, like it was good. I mean, that's what sin does. Brings you to a place where maybe, there's some pleasantries, there's some feelings, there's some emotions, there's whatever, and you let your guard down. And then you let your guard down, and then you realize in a moment that something you cared about, something that you needed, something that you wanted was taken from you. And it's because it's deceptive. It's because what sin wants to do is it wants nothing more than to deceive you. It wants to trick you. It wants to cause you to think a certain way so that once you start thinking that way, it can pounce on you. And there's a lot of ways that sin does this, but a few of the ways that I've seen really common is that one of the ways that sin deceives us is it causes us to think, like we look back on things where maybe God has given us victory in the past. Like maybe there are sins in your life that you used to struggle with, but you look back and you're like, you know what, it has been years. Or maybe it's been months and you just kind of feel like, you know what, I think I've overcome that. And what sin will cause you to do is it will cause you to look at that because it wants to deceive you and it doesn't want you to have victory. It will cause you to look back on that thing and think, you know what, I've won that battle, this is over. And so then you start thinking things about this thing where you got victory, and you think, you know what, now that I've overcome this, instead of like continuing to fight, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to see how close I can get to this line without crossing it. Like you see this with people, especially as it pertains to like things like substance abuse. They think, you know what, it's been a long time. I think I'm good. I miss those people. Since I miss those people, here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the bar. I'm just going to watch the game. I'm not going to have anything to drink. And the next thing you know, because sin is deceptive, you end up doing something that you had no intention of doing at the front end. But what sin wants to do is it wants to bring you to that place where you have more confidence in yourself than you should have. It deceives you. That sin deceives you also by thinking lies. Things like when you look at behavior, you look at things that you've had victory over, things that you want victory of, and you say things like, you know what, I'm just going to do this one more time. This will be the last time. This is it. This is it. This is the final time that I do this, and here's what I bet. If you've ever said that before, you know as well as I that that is a lie. How do you know it's a lie? Because you've said it a lot. Because 7 times ago was probably the last time, wasn't it? But why do we say it? Because in the moment when we indulge, if we tell ourselves, this is the last time, for whatever reason we feel good about it because we've told ourselves that this is the last time. And then maybe a couple days will pass, but next thing you know, you're like, it wasn't. It was a lie. Sin deceives you. Sin wants you to think that way. It wants you to think that you're stronger than you are. Another way that sin deceives us is that it causes us to look at sin. And it causes us to look at sin and think, you know what, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Yeah, I don't think it's that whatever. It's not that big of a deal. And here's the truth, like that the price you pay for sin in this life Like there is different levels of prices that you pay. You will pay a different price for lying to someone than you will for adultery. Like that is absolutely how it works in this world. And we're probably glad to a certain extent that it is, right? But here's the problem. Though we pay a different price in this world, Jesus paid the same price for all of them. Paul says that the death he died for sin once and for all. So like, in his eyes, it's all the same. He paid the same price for the adulterer that he paid for the liar. So for us to think, you know what, I just don't think this behavior is that big of a deal, what we're saying is they're saying, well, the price that Jesus paid wasn't that significant. And so we say things like, I just want to lie, who cares? Yeah, I know I'm not really supposed to talk about people behind their back, but everybody does it. Or we think, I fly off the handle every once in a while, and I say things I regret, but who doesn't do that? Seriously, and they deserved it. And we say these things, and we justify these behaviors. We treat them like they're not that big of a deal. Not only does that diminish the price that Jesus paid for those, but it also opens us up to go down a road that we have no intention of going down. Because the thing with sin is that it starts really, really small. But then over time, as we feed it and we let it grow, we end up opening our eyes and we're like, man, I never had any intention of being here. Jesus' brother, his name is James, and he wrote a letter, and it's in our New Testament. And he says this about kind of the process of sin. He says it in the first chapter of his letter. This is what he says. He says, let no one say when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted or lured and enticed by their own desires. And desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin. Look at there at the end. And sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Sin starts small. It wants you to think, it's not that big of a deal. Because the more times you say that about behavior that doesn't please God, the further you go down that road. And the problem with that road is that the road ends in death. That this is what the enemy wants. The enemy wants you on that road, cruise into death. And here's what sin will do. Sin brings death to everything. But James is talking, he's talking about spiritual death, I think. I think he's talking about how this can bring death to your relationship with God. But let's just be honest. Sin brings more than death to your relationship with God. It brings death to your relationships. It brings death to your family. It can bring death to your finances. That what sin wants to do is it wants to consume you and kill you. And the thing is, we start by saying, it's not that big of a deal. And then what happens, we say that enough times. We indulge enough behaviors that don't please God, then what ends up happening is we end up at the end of the road that leads to death. That's why he's a thief. And some people, what they do is they push back at this point, and they'll say something like, but Ryan, come on. Like, we all sin. And Jesus, he died for our sins. So, this is what we do. And yeah, that's true. We're all, there's some of you in this room, man, I bet you like me, there are some things you're going to struggle with until you're at the end. That's absolutely true. But the question is, how do you want to approach that? Do you want to approach that like a fight, or do you want to approach it with a warm embrace? And what I love about Scripture is that Scripture saw this one coming. And when it saw Paul, he wrote a letter to the church at Rome. And he wrote a letter to the church at Rome knowing that people would probably think this when we consider the grace of God and the fact that we're always going to sin. And he tells us how we should approach it. Look at this in Romans chapter 6. He says this, he says, what shall we say then in response to God's grace? Are we to continue in sin so that grace may abound? By no means. How can we who died to sin continue to live in it? He's addressing the person that says, well, this is just who I am. This is just what I do. I'm a 6 or whatever that person, like, this is what he's saying, no. You don't embrace it. You died to it. You can't live in it. That you fight it. And you continue to fight it. And if you ever want to experience victory, you're going to experience it through fighting. But what sin doesn't say, sin doesn't tell us how it's going to end. Like England did not tell the colonies, hey, we're going to continue to raise your taxes. We're going to continue to add taxes to you. We're never going to give you representation. Sorry, it's how it's going to go. They never said that. They kept making promises they had no intention to keep. Sin's not going to tell you, hey, this is going to result in all of your relationships being broken, and you're not going to really know me anymore, but you're not even going to realize it because you're going to go so slowly. It's not going to say that. The guy, in the same way, the guy who walked into the church and like, hey, I'm here to steal the parts in your toilet. Like, you don't do that. It deceives. And it's good at it. It's so good at it that you eventually open your eyes and you think, man, this is not where I wanted to be. Because sin is deceptive. The other thing about sin that we have to realize is that sin doesn't care about you. I think sometimes we think that. Because like we'll be like, oh, I have a good feeling when I do this. I feel powerful, or I feel in charge or in control. And so we think because of the emotion that comes with it at times, that it cares. When the truth is, it cares nothing about you. And I think that's probably why the song jumped out at me, because what King George is saying in the song is he's saying, I don't really care about you. I mean, look at the last two stanzas. He says, when push comes to shove, I'm going to send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Then he says a little bit, when push comes to shove, I'll kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Here's the thing. He says, my love. I think the reason why it's funny is because you would never say that to someone you loved. That would not be how it goes. Like, that is not what you do for someone that you love. Sin doesn't love you. It doesn't care about you. It wants to destroy you. And it wants to destroy you in such a way that it will destroy everything around you if you'll let it. And Jesus makes this very clear in John 10. I mean, look, what is the thief's purpose in John 10? He comes only to steal, to kill, and destroy. His sole purpose is to ruin you. And if that means he has to make you feel good for a little bit, he will, but eventually he will ruin you. That's why he's here. And then you have, even a little bit later, it says in verse 13, it says, he flees. He flees when trouble comes. Sin's not there when you need it. And the reason why is because it cares nothing about you. It cares nothing. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about what you want. It doesn't want you to feel, it just wants to ruin you. That sin is nothing more than an abusive relationship. But the problem is we don't pick up on it often until it's too late. And that road that leads us to death, that there are things along the road that if we just picked up on them, we would fight a little bit harder. But one of the ways that sin ruins us is it ruins us through things like shame. As I talk about sin, I talk about behavior, I bet there's some of you think of things that are in your past. And as you think about some of those things in your past, there's probably this feeling of shame that pops up, right? There's probably this feeling of, gosh, I sure hope no one ever finds out about that. And it's heavy. And even now in this moment when you think about those things, right, I bet none of you would say, you know what, it was worth it. It's never worth it. But shame it's poisonous to our souls. It kills our confidence. It makes it hard for us as we pray and spend time because we just feel like we've got this weight on us that we can't deal with. But not only does it do this, but also what shame does is it's disastrous to our theology and our beliefs about God. I talk to people who have done things that they look back on and they regret, and one of the things that they'll say when they consider the lack of blessing that's currently in their life is they'll say, well, surely because I did this, that must be why God's not blessing me right now. Shame, and that's not how God works. God doesn't do that. But because shame can be so oppressive, it causes us to think things about God that are not true at all. That there's this weight. And what sin wants to do is it wants to bring you there. It wants to poison your soul. It wants you to carry this weight and this burden that Jesus really came to carry for you if you would just let him. Another way that sin destroys us, another way that we see that sin doesn't care, is that what happens oftentimes with sin is we get caught. And then when you get caught, then all those lies that you told yourself on the road, in that moment when you get caught, you realize they were all lies. You realize all the times that you said just one more time, you were lying to yourself, and that is humiliating, isn't it? You realize people that you held in high esteem, that you respected, they kind of look at you a little bit differently because they realize that maybe your actions aren't lining up with your words, and that's hard. And what sin wants to do is sin wants to bring you to that place where you get caught and where you feel shame. I know maybe some of you think, oh, Ryan, I don't feel shame. And I am never going to get caught. You have no idea how long I've been doing this. No one will ever find me out. And to the shame thing, I would just say, well, you probably haven't felt any shame because the right person hasn't caught you yet, or the right person hasn't called you out yet. That once they do, you probably will. But even then. And to the idea of getting caught, okay, let's just say that you never do, which I think that the odds of that are pretty low. But let's say that you never do. One of the things I always remind myself is that there is going to come a day at the very end where I'm going to stand in the presence of God. I probably won't be standing, but I will be in the presence of God. And when I do, He's going to see my life. He's going to see all of it. And that's not just going to happen to me, that's going to happen to all of us if God is who he says he is and we believe that he is. And so we're all going to stand before him. And here's what we're going to realize in that moment. You who says, I've never felt shame, and you who says that I've never been caught, I would just say that in that moment, both of those things will happen. Because maybe you've never felt shame, or you've never gotten caught because you have a lot of charisma and you just have this ability to talk yourself out of stuff. Well, in that moment, you're not going to have anything to say because he's just going to point. And you're going to be in his presence, and you're not going to dare question him in his presence. And it's going to feel really heavy because here's what you're going to be aware of in that moment. You're going to be aware of the fact that you're guilty. You're going to be aware that you're guilty and treat it like it wasn't a big deal your whole life on earth, and now you're standing in the presence of God, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a real big thing. And in that moment, here's what we're all going to realize. We're all going to realize that no one gets away with anything because he saw it all. All those things that we thought we were really good at hiding, he will see. And when he does, we'll realize that he is the last person that we really wanted to see those things. Sin doesn't care about you. Sin wants to make you think that that isn't going to happen. Sin wants to make you think that that isn't a reality, but the truth is that that is where it takes you. I like the way that one of Jesus' disciples, a man named Peter, that he talks about Satan. And he says this in his first letter. He says this. He says, be sober-minded. Be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. That you are, make no doubt about it, you are his prey. He's hunting you. That he wants you to be deceived. He wants you to think that he cares more than he does. He wants you to think that it's going to be worth it, but the truth is that it's not. He doesn't care. He's deceptive. He wants to destroy you. That's sin. This is what it does. But the truth of this text is that there's also another side to this coin. And the other side to this coin is that Jesus offers a better way. That he does. That you can choose to feed something that doesn't care about you and that's just going to try to steal from you. Or you can pursue something different. I mean, the turning point for America and the American history, or in Hamilton or whatever, is when they realized that what they were being offered, it wasn't freedom, it was bondage. And the same is true for you. That when you look at your sin and you realize what I am being offered isn't freedom, it's actually bondage. For you, that's the turning point. And the beauty of the gospel, the beauty of Jesus and what he came to do, is he came to set you free. He came to bring you life. That in the same way that sin is crouching at your door, looking for something to devour you, that Jesus is just looking for a way to bring you life and bring you hope. I mean, look at the alternative that you see here in John's gospel, in John chapter 10. Look at this. This is Jesus talking about his purpose. He's talking about why he came into this world. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Why does Jesus come? He came that you might have life and have it abundantly. That as the thief comes to ruin you, only to steal, kill, and destroy from you. He came just to give you life. That for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. That as committed as the thief is to deceiving you and ruining you, Jesus is committed to giving you life. He wants you to experience life without the stain and weight of our sin and shame. He came for that, to give you life. He gives you life in this world and life in the next. It's there for you if you will take it. But not only did he come to give you life, but look, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Where the enemy says, okay, when things get bad, your sin isn't going to be there. It's not going to be there for you. In those moments where you feel stupid, you're just going to feel alone and dumb. Where Jesus is like, no, I'm going to lay down my life for you to provide a way out for you in those moments. That where sin doesn't care, Jesus says, I care so much that I'll give my life to pay for your sin. That the battle that you'll never be able to win this side of heaven, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk out of heaven. I'm going to lay down my life. I'm going to fight for you. And all you have to do is put your faith in me. And the victory that you could have never attained on your own is yours in me. I came that they might lay down my life for the sheep. Not only that, whereas the sin, you're just a number. Whereas the sin, you're just another person they're trying to ruin. Jesus says, I know my own, and my own know me. That there is an option, as Jesus is the better way. There's an option for intimacy. There's an option for closeness. He's saying, you can know me. You can be in relationship with me. I know you personally. And then again, he just reminds us at the end, I lay down my life for the sheep. That Jesus offers a better way. That where sin brings shame, brings getting caught, brings death to everything that matters, Jesus brings grace, forgiveness, and life to everything that matters. And so the question that we have to pose this morning, what are you going to choose? What are you going to feed? Are you going to fight? Are you going to fight the battle for your soul? Are you going to go for it? Or are you going to give in to something that will deceive you and that doesn't care about you and that ultimately will ruin you? It's your call. As I close this morning, I know like this is a church, right? And we're probably all like, okay, yeah, I choose Jesus. Like I want to do what he wants me to do. I want to be in the place. But we all know, if you've been doing this thing for any period of time, right? It's not as simple as just saying like, I'll pick Jesus. That's easy. Done. I'm right? Like there's probably some of you, there are probably things in your life that you have been battling for so long, you're like, geez, am I ever going to stop fighting this? I don't know. But here's what I can tell you is there is a way to fight. And there's a way to fight that brings more victory than not. And so in your battle with sin, I just encourage you to 3 thoughts. One is this: the things that you struggle with, stay away from them. Jesus says in Matthew 6, and he teaches us how to pray. One of the things he teaches us to pray is that we should pray, lead us not into temptation. There's this false idea that if we want to be strong, what we do is we get as close to the edge as we can, and that reveals strength because we're close without going over, when the truth is Jesus says, no, you get as far away from the things that push you off the edge as you can. If there are circumstances, if there are people, if there are places where you constantly find yourself trapped or stuck or doing things that you regret, the answer is to stop going to those places, to stop being around those people, to stop indulging those. That's the first step. The other thing you do is you got to remind yourself of the truth. And the truth is that sin is deceptive and it cares nothing about you. So what you have to remind yourself in the moment of temptation, and it will come, is that what I get out of this is not going to be worth the price that I'm ultimately going to have to pay. And in that moment, that's what you have to tell yourself. And still, even then, if you do those things, there are going to be moments where you're going to win. And there are going to be moments when you don't. And either way, in those moments, what you do is the same, and that's you lean on Jesus. When you fall, he's there. He lifts you up. He laid down his life for you. So when you fall, you know that there is someone there who wants to give you grace. And when you win, lean on him. And lean on him because realize the only reason you are able to win is because of what he did for you on the cross. That without that, you would continue to lose. That this is how we fight sin.